The wind howled across the desolate landscape of Epsilon 9, carrying the scent of charred metal and blood. The planet, once a thriving colony, had been reduced to a barren war zone. Craters marked the land like battle scars, and the remains of downed spacecraft lay in twisted heaps. Sergeant James Calloway knelt behind the remains of a destroyed transport, his rifle steady despite the gash on his forehead. His team, the last remnants of a Green Beret unit sent to disrupt Dominion supply lines, lay scattered around him, battered but unbroken. A few clicks away, the Galactic Dominion soldiers moved with the confidence of a force that had never tasted true adversity. Tall, sinewy figures encased in sleek, shimmering battle armor. They resembled living war machines more than men. Their weapons, sleek plasma rifles that hissed with energy, contrasted sharply with the battered but dependable firearms the Green Berets carried. One of the Dominion officers, a towering figure with dark, pupilless eyes, sneered as he surveyed the battlefield. "Pathetic," he muttered in his native tongue, his voice a guttural hiss. "These humans struggle like insects, clinging to their obsolete tactics and crude weapons." Laughter erupted from the Dominion ranks. To them, this skirmish had been a predictable, almost boring, affair. They had cut down the humans with ease, their energy shields shrugging off bullets, while their advanced targeting systems made short work of the opposition. A handful of wounded Green Berets still drew breath, huddled behind wreckage and rock formations, their uniforms stained with blood and dirt. Calloway exhaled slowly, listening to the arrogance in the aliens' voices. Their mistake wasn't just underestimating his team. It was assuming the fight was already over. A low groan came from Private Mitchell, who clutched his side where a Dominion blast had torn through his armor. His face was pale, but his grip on his rifle remained firm. Calloway met his eyes and gave a small nod. They had all trained for this. Wounded didn't mean helpless. One of the Dominion soldiers sauntered toward the human survivors, helmet retracted to reveal skin like polished obsidian. He leaned down, nudging the body of a fallen Green Beret with the tip of his boot. "You die so easily," he mused, his voice thick with amusement. "All that bravado, all that defiance, and for what? A slow death on a forgotten rock." Another soldier chuckled. "They don't even understand. They are obsolete, primitive. A species too stubborn to accept its place beneath us." The laughter spread again, echoing through the battlefield. Calloway felt the heat of rage coil in his gut, but he forced himself to stay still. Now wasn't the time. A Dominion officer approached, draped in the deep crimson cloak that marked a unit commander. His cold, reptilian gaze swept over the wounded humans before he spoke in near-perfect English. "Your resistance is admirable if misguided. The Dominion is merciful. Lay down your weapons, and you will be granted a painless end." Silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant crackle of dying fires. Then Calloway smiled. It wasn't the expression of a defeated man. It was the grin of a soldier who knew something the enemy didn't. The commander's brow furrowed just as Calloway spoke, voice calm despite the chaos around him. "You have no idea what's coming." The words hung there for a second before one of the Green Berets, barely able to lift his arm, pulled the pin from a grenade and let it roll toward the feet of the Dominion commander. For the first time in the battle, the aliens hesitated. Then the explosion roared to life. The shockwaves sent bodies tumbling, a cloud of dust and debris swallowing the immediate area. The Dominion soldiers, who had been standing too close, were thrown back, their shimmering armor scorched and dented. Calloway didn't waste a second. He surged forward, pistol drawn, firing into the stunned ranks before they could recover. His team followed suit, wounded, battered, but relentless. Mitchell, despite his injuries, braced against a fallen beam and fired into the chaos, picking off aliens struggling to get their bearings. Sergeant Alvarez, limping but grinning through bloody teeth, yanked a Dominion rifle from a fallen soldier and turned it against its owners, bright blue energy lancing through their ranks. The air filled with panic shouts as the once confident Dominion forces scrambled for cover. "Fall back," one of them barked in their guttural language. But it was too late. The Green Berets had already melted into the wreckage, shifting from open targets to ghosts in the battlefield, striking with precision before vanishing into the smoke. The Dominion had walked onto Epsilon, 9 believing themselves untouchable, convinced of their superiority. Now, for the first time, they were learning what it meant to fear humans. The Dominion soldiers scrambled through the wreckage, their previous confidence shattered. The battlefield that had once seemed like a stage for their effortless victory had transformed into a maze of shadows and unseen threats. Every step they took felt watched, every movement punctuated by the lingering echoes of human gunfire. The humans were no longer pinned down, no longer the desperate remnants of a failed resistance. They were hunting. Sergeant Calloway moved through the ruins with the fluid precision of a predator. The bleeding gash on his forehead had crusted over, but he hardly noticed the sting. His breath was measured, his heartbeat steady. His men were wounded, low on ammunition, and facing a technologically superior enemy. But they had one advantage the Dominion didn't: adaptability. Alvarez crouched beside him, adjusting the stolen Dominion rifle. "They're panicking," he murmured, watching as a squad of aliens huddled near a half-toppled structure, scanning the darkness with wide, unseeing eyes. "They expected us to roll over and die," Calloway replied, shifting his grip on his carbine. "Now they're learning the hard way." A crackle of movement to their left. Calloway signaled, and both men melted into the rubble, pressing against the charred remains of a transport. A pair of Dominion scouts passed by, their armor reflecting the dull glow of distant fires. They whispered in their guttural tongue, voices edged with nervous tension. Calloway didn't need to understand the words to recognize fear. He let them pass before signaling Alvarez. A quick movement, a silent exchange of nods. 2 suppressed shots snapped through the air. The Dominion soldiers barely had time to react before crumpling to the ground, their lifeless bodies vanishing into the rubble. Elsewhere, Mitchell and Corporal Hayes moved through the ruined outskirts of the battlefield, positioning themselves to cut off any retreating forces. Mitchell's wounds slowed him, but he ignored the pain, his focus locked onto their objective. Hayes scanned the area, eyes sharp. "Dominion still got numbers," Hayes muttered. "If they regroup, we're screwed." "They won't get the chance," Mitchell replied, nodding toward a makeshift trap they'd set, a tangle of salvaged Dominion explosives rigged beneath a fallen structure. The moment the enemy sought shelter there, they'd be turned into scorched wreckage. The Dominion's arrogance had been their downfall. They had relied on their shields and technology, assuming it made them untouchable. Now, those same energy fields made them predictable. The Green Berets didn't fight with raw force. They fought with ingenuity, turning the environment itself into a weapon. A sudden burst of plasma fire ripped through the ruins, forcing Calloway and Alvarez into cover. A Dominion squad, regaining its composure, advanced with disciplined precision. Their commander barked orders, and the soldiers fanned out, sweeping through the wreckage in a slow but relentless advance. Calloway exhaled, then gestured toward a broken pipeline running through the rubble. A Dominion soldier passed beneath it, unaware. Calloway took aim and fired. The round punched through the weakened metal above, igniting the gas within. A fireball erupted, engulfing the soldier and sending the rest scattering. Chaos erupted. Mitchell and Hayes opened fire from their vantage point, dropping 2 more Dominion troops before vanishing into the darkness. Alvarez switched to burst fire, his stolen rifle spitting bright blue energy into the advancing ranks. Calloway moved with him, keeping their fire disciplined, forcing the Dominion to falter. A Dominion lieutenant snarled something in his language before pressing his gauntlet. A shimmering energy barrier flared to life, covering the remaining soldiers. Confident once more, they advanced, weapons primed. Calloway cursed under his breath. Dominion shield technology was nearly impenetrable to conventional gunfire. Nearly. He reached for his radio. "Mitchell, we've got a shielded squad advancing. Can you adjust?" There was a pause. Then Mitchell's voice crackled through. "Give me 10 seconds." Calloway ducked behind cover as the Dominion squad opened fire again, their plasma bolts sizzling against the debris. The air grew thick with a stench of scorched metal and ozone. Then, from above, a dull thump. The jury-rigged explosives Mitchell had planted detonated, sending a wall of debris cascading down onto the shielded squad. The barrier flickered, struggling against the sheer force of impact. Before it could stabilize, a second explosion followed, a precisely placed charge that sent shrapnel slicing through the exposed gaps in their armor. The Dominion soldiers crumpled, their shield failing, their bodies broken beneath the rubble. Calloway stood, scanning the destruction. A few survivors twitched weakly in the debris. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You should have finished the job when you had the chance." The Dominion officer, pinned beneath a slab of metal, glared up at him, blood leaking from his split lips. His expression was no longer one of condescension, but something far closer to horror. Calloway holstered his weapon. "Mitchell, Hayes, regroup. We're not done yet." The night stretched ahead, filled with smoke and silence. Somewhere in the distance, the remaining Dominion forces were rallying, desperate to reclaim control. But they weren't facing a broken resistance anymore. They were facing something far worse. Humans who refused to die. The Dominion forces moved through the ruins like men chasing ghosts. Their armor, once gleaming under the twin moons of Epsilon 9, was now dulled by dirt and blood. Their discipline had begun to fray, their formations losing cohesion as paranoia set in. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. Each corner they turned, each structure they approached, held the possibility of another ambush, another trap waiting to be sprung. The arrogance they once carried so easily had been stripped away, replaced by a mounting dread. Sergeant Calloway watched them from the shadows, crouched atop the skeletal remains of a collapsed transport. He could see it in their movements, the tension in their shoulders, the nervous way their weapons swung side to side, fingers twitching on the triggers. These weren't the same soldiers who had mocked his wounded men hours before. These were men who had begun to understand fear. Alvarez shifted beside him, his rifle braced against his shoulder. "They're breaking," he whispered. Calloway gave a slow nod. "Not enough." A Dominion soldier paused beneath them, eyes scanning the darkness. His grip tightened on his rifle, a deep breath shuddering through him. Calloway could almost hear the thoughts racing through his head. Was he being watched? Would his next step be his last? Mitchell's voice crackled in Calloway's earpiece. "Squad to the east is digging in. They're trying to regroup." "They won't get the chance," Calloway muttered. He shifted his grip on his carbine, then signaled Alvarez. The two men moved in sync, silent as shadows, positioning themselves for the next strike. A sudden scream echoed through the ruins. It came from the east. The Dominion squad Mitchell had been watching erupted into chaos, their shouts carrying through the night. Plasma fire lit up the darkness, but it wasn't directed at the humans. They were shooting at nothing, their weapons discharging wildly into the ruins, as if trying to fend off an unseen enemy. Calloway smirked. The psychological warfare was working. The Dominion were not used to this kind of fight. They were an empire built on technological supremacy, on the belief that their advancements made them invincible. They had never fought a force like the Green Berets, soldiers who adapted, who used terrain and fear as weapons just as effectively as bullets. One of the Dominion soldiers turned too quickly, his footing unstable on the uneven ground. He stumbled, and in that fraction of a second, Calloway fired. A single suppressed shot, clean and precise. The soldier crumpled, his body hitting the dirt with a dull thud. The others erupted in a frenzy, firing wildly into the darkness, their formations collapsing as they scrambled for cover. Calloway and Alvarez vanished into the ruins, already repositioning before the enemy could even process what had happened. This was how you dismantle the force, not through brute strength, but by turning their own minds against them. The Dominion's commander, a broad-shouldered officer with deep scars running across his obsidian skin, barked orders in their guttural language. He was trying to restore order, trying to remind his men that they were superior. But the cracks were already there. A soldier hesitated before following his command. Another flinched at the sound of shifting rubble. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were spreading fast. Mitchell's voice came through the radio again, tight with amusement. "They're calling us demons now." Calloway's smirk deepened. "Good. Let's show them why." The humans struck again before the Dominion could regroup. Explosives planted in the wreckage of a fallen structure detonated, sending shrapnel tearing through their ranks. Those who survived staggered back, only to be met with rifle fire from unseen positions. They weren't fighting an army. They were fighting ghosts. One of the Dominion soldiers broke. He let out a sharp, panicked cry and turned to run. His commander snarled, reaching to grab him. Too late. A single shot rang out, and the fleeing soldier collapsed face-first into the dirt. The commander looked around wildly, his fury twisting into something closer to desperation. He had underestimated these humans. He had laughed at them, mocked them as broken remnants of a dying race. Now, as he stared at the bodies of his men scattered across the ruins, he realized the truth. The humans weren't losing. They were winning. Calloway watched from the darkness, his pulse steady, his breathing slow. The battle was shifting. The Dominion still had numbers, still had weapons more advanced than anything humanity had ever wielded. But none of that mattered if they didn't have the will to fight. He switched his radio to an open channel. "Attention Dominion forces," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "This is Sergeant Calloway of the United States Army Special Forces. You made a mistake today." There was silence on the other end. He knew they were listening. "You thought this was a battle," he continued. "But for us, this is just another training exercise." He let the words hang in the air for a moment before switching frequencies. "Mitchell, Hayes, tighten the noose. We're finishing this." The Dominion forces had abandoned their bravado. Their movements, once calculated and arrogant, had turned frantic and desperate. The battlefield that had once seemed like their playground had become a prison, a maze of ruin and smoke where death lurked in unseen corners. They were trying to retreat, to regroup, to find some semblance of control, but the humans would not allow it. Sergeant Calloway and his team moved through the wreckage like phantoms, pressing the advantage. Every step the Dominion took backward was met with relentless pressure, a reminder that there was no escape. Mitchell's voice crackled in Calloway's earpiece. "They're trying to fall back to the drop zone. Looks like they're calling for evac." Calloway's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let them call. No one's coming." He signaled Alvarez and Hayes, and the three of them maneuvered to higher ground, taking positions along the fractured remains of a crumbling overpass. Below, the Dominion commander was barking orders, his voice raw with frustration. The commander was bleeding now, his once imposing armor smeared with dirt and ash. His soldiers were still trying to hold formation, but the cracks had become canyons. Some flinched at every sound, others hesitated before following orders, as if expecting the ground beneath them to explode at any moment. "They still think someone's coming for them," Alvarez muttered. "They're wrong," Calloway replied. Mitchell's voice returned, colder now. "Orbital scans show no inbound Dominion ships." They cut their losses. A long silence stretched between them. The Dominion forces on the ground were beginning to realize it too. Their signals for extraction went unanswered, their distress calls met with silence. The mighty empire that had promised them dominance had decided they were expendable. The first soldier dropped his weapon. It clattered against the rubble, the sound unnaturally loud in the eerie quiet. A second followed, his shoulders slumping. Fear had given way to something worse, defeat. The Dominion commander spun toward his men, his fury boiling over. He struck one of them across the face, bellowing something in his guttural tongue. A final, desperate attempt to hold his unit together. Calloway gave the signal. A single shot rang out, and the commander staggered. His body swayed for a brief moment before crumpling to the ground, a smoking hole between his eyes. For a heartbeat, the battlefield stood still. Then the rest of the Dominion soldiers dropped to their knees, hands raised, weapons abandoned. Calloway exhaled, lowering his rifle. His pulse remained steady. His men emerged from the ruins, weapons still trained, but they all knew the fight was over. Hayes approached, his expression unreadable. Think they regret laughing at us now? Calloway glanced at the defeated soldiers, at the terror in their eyes. He thought of the way they had mocked the wounded, the way they had spoken of humans, as if they were already dead. They learned something today, he said. Doesn't matter if they regret it. Alvarez kicked away a discarded Dominion rifle. Think Command's gonna believe this? 6 of us, taking down an entire Dominion unit. Calloway let out a breath, scanning the ruins. The bodies. The silence. They'll believe it, he said. Or they'll see the proof themselves. The night stretched before them, filled with smoke and the quiet murmur of surrendering soldiers. The battle was over, but war never truly ended, and humanity had just begun to fight back.